Friends, thank you very much for giving up a Monday night to be in Camden Town Hall. It's very kind of you. And it's an incredible evening when we've had to have overflow meetings in the council chamber, downstairs, and on top of the FBU fire engine outside with the best banner in the world which says, "We are the FBU, we save people, not banks." Well done, the FBU. And big thank you to Mark, to Otka for this evening's meeting and all his work on behalf of his brilliant members as a Union General Secretary, and all the others that have spoken tonight and brought us the kind of hope, of the kind of ideas, of the kind of society that we all want to live in. I think we should be very proud of those people, the way many of them, such as Martha Osamore, have stood up for decades against racism, decades against injustice, and helped to bring us together here tonight. This is a wonderful city. London is a truly magnificent city, there's no question about that, and I'm very proud to represent a London constituency. But it's also the most unequal city in Britain, where the richest 1% own a great deal more than the other 99% of the population. Where there are too many children going to bed hungry at night, where there are too many people sleeping on the streets, there are too many people leading a life of destitution, and there are too many luxury mansions kept empty as land banking for somebody to make easy money out of them in the future. So, we have to do something about that. We have to do something about the levels of air pollution. We have to do something about the levels of debt, poverty that so many graduates end up facing because of the debts they leave university with. And so many young people leaving college well qualified, unable to find work. So you have to ask yourselves, what's politically on offer? Now, in the general election, I worked very, very hard to try and get a Labour government elected. I spent time in my own community, obviously, and I'm deeply honoured and very humble at the support that we received in my constituency in Islington North, where we had the largest vote, the largest majority, and the highest turnout ever. Probably, and not unconnected, with us saying why I was against austerity and what I thought about the austerity agenda. Because whilst there were good things in the Labour manifesto, and no question about that, there were good things in it, the problem was that underneath it, we had accepted, somewhere along the line, that the banking crisis of 2008 to 10, which brought down so many banks in this country and so many other places around the world, was brought about by the subprime mortgage crisis, was brought about by greed, was brought about by the lack of regulation. And then somewhere along the line, who's paid the price for that? Who's paid the price? The poorest who've had their benefits cut, the homeless that haven't been housed, the health workers that have been underpaid, the public service workers that have been either made redundant or had wage freezes, those that have been privatised and handed over to zero-hours contracts, those that have been so grievously mistreated. Was it nurses that caused the banking crisis? Was it street cleaners that caused the banking crisis? Was it the unemployed that caused the banking crisis? Or was it the inability or refusal of governments to face up to a financial system that allowed that crisis to be brought about? And so, somewhere along the line, our party unfortunately swallowed a lot of that agenda, and that caused us not to win the election just gone. I spent time campaigning in many places. I went to Thanet, I went to Peterborough, I went to Norwich, I went to Great Yarmouth, I went to lots of places. And I had some very interesting discussions with large numbers of people, including some who sadly were tempted to vote for UKIP. They were tempted on one level because it seemed easy for them to blame the latest group of hard-working migrants to arrive in this country for all the problems. And I suggested to some of these people that possibly the shortage of housing, the shortage of school places, the difficulties of getting a doctor's appointment were brought about by the inability and refusal of our society to invest enough in housing, education, health, medicine, and all those things. And you can bring people together. You can bring people together. Move on from the blame culture. Move on to the collective and how things are achieved. How do you think the National Health Service was ever achieved in Britain? Was it achieved because a group of well-educated, well-spoken members of Parliament sat round in the luxurious atmosphere of the members' tea room and said, a National Health Service, that'd be a really good idea. That'd be a really good idea, let's do that. No, it was born of people living in desperation in the 19th century who got together to found their own local health facilities. I'm very proud of the Camden Centre in my constituency, long forerunner of the principle of the NHS, a centre developed by the working class community to help people at times of stress. That happened in many other places. It happened in the mining communities, it happened with progressive councils in London, in Southwark, particularly in Bermondsey, where Dr. Salter was such a huge figure in developing health services, the radical London Borough of Finsbury, many, many others. But in the end, it needed something different. It needed a national endeavour. And Aaron Bevan gave us that national endeavour. He made it a national health service, free at the point of view, for all time, for all people. And when he was asked, near the end of his life, how long do you think the National Health Service will last? And he said, it will last as long as there are folk prepared to defend it. Well, we're going to be there defending the National Health Service. And we're going to stop the privatisation within the National Health Service and learn the lessons of PFI within the National Health Service and the millstone around the neck of every hospital that's been built under PFI. So it's our health service, not one that's on sale, not one that's an internal market. Let's be strong about that. But let's also think for a moment about the levels of poverty and inequality that exist within our society. I get from the response you've just given to the remarks I've just made that you're pretty much in favour of the National Health Service. Thank you. First thing achieved. Second up, welfare. Yeah, welfare. I'm not going to condemn somebody in receipt of disability benefits and call them a scrounger. I'm not going to call somebody who's claiming to which they're entitled a scrounger. I'm not going to vote for a benefit cap, knowing full well that the reality of that benefit cap is that it is driving people out of central London and central cities all over this country. And it's a system that essentially, in substantial measure, subsidises low wages and high rents. We can, must and should and will do a lot better. Can't we measure the success of a society by the reductions in inequality, by the improvements in the life chances of everybody, and a society where parents don't face the summer school holidays with that sense of horror because they've got to find enough money to give their kids breakfast and lunches which are being provided by the school because they don't have enough money to feed their children? Can't we instead measure society by the improvements of health and opportunities for our children, by the care that's given for those that need that help and support, by the way in which we deal with the adult social care crisis? Why instead are we accepting the idea that it's okay to take £12 billion out of the welfare budget? It's okay to slash the budgets of every inner city local authority across the whole country, knowing full well the consequences for some of the most desperate and needy people across the whole of this country? Can't we instead look to a society that shares rather than takes all the time? But the Tories, they awfully look like a throwback to the 1980s to me. I'm accused of being a 1980s throwback. I was in this hall in 1984, standing alongside the miners, defending the mining industry and the miners. And judging by the appearance of some of you, you were here with me at that time. Welcome back. But welcome also to everyone else that's part of this campaign and what we're trying to achieve here today. So can't we be proud of the idea of a society and a welfare system that protects all and eliminates poverty for all, so we don't pass by on the other side while fellow citizens sleep on the street and wonder how they're going to survive? We don't pass by on the other side while those with mental health conditions go unsupported and unhelped and end up being put in a secure psychiatric unit and fed a diet of drugs. Can't we do something about a more civilised society? But again, back to the 1980s, Margaret Thatcher and the Tories got elected in 1979, essentially on a false promise. Basically, they were selling £10 notes for a fiver, and a lot of people bought into that. They then went on to damage and destroy trade unions and trade union rights, to destroy the manufacturing base of this country, to establish a financial services economy rather than a manufacturing economy. And so, our campaign is at one level a campaign about one position in the Labour Party. It's also about unleashing hope in many people. Hope that we can develop an economy that does proudly and publicly invest in high technology, invest in green energy, invest in sustainable jobs, invest in our young people, invest in the hopes of all people. And instead of passing quantitative easing to the banks, set up a national investment bank that can bring that about, that can finance the rail infrastructure we need, that can finance the council housing that we need to conquer the housing crisis. And in putting all those things forward, start to think about the issues that face our world and the issues that face this planet. There are terrible dangers out there. Many of us got together in 2001, and I'm proud to be one of them, to found and form the Stop the War Coalition. We met in Friends Meeting House just down the road, 3,000 of us that night. And we met because in the words of Bruce Kent at the time, if you unleash the dogs of war, you won't get them back in the kennels for a very long time or very easily. I was never a supporter of the Taliban. I was never an apologist for Saddam Hussein. Indeed, I was one of a minority of 3 or 4 MPs that opposed arms sales to Iraq during the time of Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. But wars have a horrible consequence of getting out of control. The history of wars is usually written by the victors. And George Bush decided he'd won the war and wrote a story about it. Well, we'll leave that to George Bush. But when you look down the line at Libya, you look down the line at Mali, you look down the line at Syria, you look down the line at the millions of refugees around the world, you look at those desperate people in Libya, you look at those desperate people trying to get across the Mediterranean, you look at those desperate people in Calais. None of this is simple. I'm not pretending there's an easy answer to anything. There isn't. But, and this is a big but, do we approach the issues of the world on the basis of our ability to militarily invade and intervene? Or do we instead approach it on the basis that we're all human beings on one planet? We're all there to support fellow humanity on this planet. And the disgusting language that's been used in the past few days about those people in Calais is totally out of court, should not be allowed. They are people that are victims of a much wider system. And this country, along with every other country in Europe, should play its part in bringing about a humanitarian solution to a humanitarian crisis. And whilst we're on the subject of wars and peace, I've been through the debate about nuclear weapons all of my life. I joined CND when I was 15. I was probably the only member in the small town in Shropshire where I joined, so it was a very easy group to meet. We got along just fine. Why? Do nuclear weapons bring about peace? Does a nuclear explosion anywhere in the world bring about peace? I met the Foreign Minister of the Marshall Islands, who as a child witnessed a nuclear test in the Pacific, saw his islands and his country used as a bombing range for testing nuclear weapons, and they're still paying the price. They're paying the price with destruction, they're paying the price with cancers. On Thursday, I hope you'll all come, we're going to be in Tavistock Square commemorating Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are still people suffering cancers as a result of those nuclear explosions. Is there any moral basis whatsoever for holding and therefore being prepared to use a weapon of ultimate mass destruction which can only take millions of civilians' lives? Or could we do something different and something better? I was in New York for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference in May, and I heard the speeches from all the nuclear powers saying they needed nuclear weapons for their security. And then I heard a speech from Abdul Minty on behalf of South Africa, anti-apartheid campaigner, who said South Africa gave up nuclear weapons so that it could live in peace and in security. They saw their security as being in peace with their neighbours, not threatening. And so this, no doubt, will become a bigger issue, both within my party and within the wider public. Fine, let's have that debate. But I say this, those people that work to manufacture nuclear weapons and all the systems that go with it are very brilliant, very skilled engineers, brilliant people. I don't see £100 billion as suddenly becoming available to spend on everything else. I see that money as available to rebalance our engineering economy, rebalance the high skills of our economy, so that those skills are not wasted in unemployment. Those skills are not wasted in doing things that are way below the capacity of those brilliant engineers, but investing in a high-skill, high-end engineering economy that can provide the hopes, jobs and prosperity for all, which doesn't involve manufacturing weapons of mass destruction that can only be a danger to the entire planet. Is it a price worth paying? I think it is. The last couple of points I want to make, because we're under lots of pressure of different things to have to do this evening, are quite simply this. Our party, our movement, came about from very brave people. Our history goes back a very long way. The toll bottle martyrs who stood up for trade union rights, the Chartists who marched through this very town to go to Westminster to present the Great Charter Petition. And indeed, I have to say very proudly, it was presented by Charles Duncan, the MP for Islington North at the time. And those people were told they were crazy, they were out of time. Indeed, Queen Victoria herself described them as horrid, nasty men, and she didn't like them being in London at all. They achieved a great deal. Maybe not that day, maybe not the next day, maybe not the next decade, but over time, the folklore lives on, the strength lives on, just as those people dreamt of a society with a National Health Service, just as Mary Wollstonecraft, writing in Newington Green on the rights of women, became the inspiration for the suffragette movement. 100 years later, just as those brave women defied everything in order to get votes for women. The march of democracy and the improvement in society goes hand in hand. You can measure it. Extend the Franchise Factories Act, extend it a bit more free education, extend it a bit more national insurance, extend it a bit more votes for women, extend it a bit more National Health Service, extend it a bit more Human Rights Act, Equalities Act. So many things have been achieved by people coming together. This at one level is about the election of somebody to hold one position in the Labour Party. But it's also, I think, an opportunity for us to have a big debate about lots of important issues. I think people have had enough of the politics of celebrity, the politics of personality, the politics of abuse. I'm frankly not prepared to name call anybody in politics because the issues are too important. I'm therefore totally unmoved by what name-calling anybody else does to anybody else. It's a distraction. Why did only 47% of young people vote in the election? Why was the election turnout so low? Because people didn't see enough of an alternative. They didn't see enough of their own lives in what we were offering. And so, whatever the result of this election on September the 12th, we've made a very, very strong point already. We had 1,500 people in Liverpool on Saturday night, crammed into the Adelphi Hotel. It was actually probably more than the fire regulations allowed. We had probably 1,000 people in Birmingham yesterday, all over the country. We're getting these huge gatherings of people. They're young, they're old, they're black, they're white, all ages, many outlooks, many people who've never been involved in politics before. Why have they come together? Why? It's an odd thing to do. Is it because they think that austerity is good for them? That somewhere along the line, the trickle-down theory of giving tax relief to the very rich will somehow or other help the very poorest? Or is it because they want to see something different in our society? Real democracy, where everybody can contribute to that policy discussion. So we don't make policy at luxurious, obscure country hotels at weekends by consensus. Instead, we have what may well be a very gritty debate in a community centre, in a school, in a college, in a place of work, in a canteen, around a water cooler, all kinds of places. And that then informs and expands our minds and brings about some real hope for the future. Those people that are telling us, quite rightly, just how dangerous the environmental crisis is. Those people, quite rightly, are telling us just how dangerous it is to develop such a deeply unequal society. They've been brought together in this campaign. Together, we are very, very strong. So after September the 12th, whatever the result, don't go away and say, well, that was a good summer, 2015, couldn't afford to go away, so went to lots of meetings instead. No. Stay together. Stay together to defend what we've got, but above all, stay together to bring about a country that doesn't thrive on inequality and injustice and poverty, a country instead that does genuinely care for all, that does provide public services that are good for all, does expand our economy, and does take back into public ownership crucial monopolies like railways, Royal Mail, and so many others, that does give us the fruits of what we're trying to do, and doesn't allow this Tory government to take away our workers' rights and our trade union rights, to trade away our trade union rights by negotiations with other countries. A country that doesn't trade away our environmental standards through TTIP. Come together in that sense of strength. And I'm sure that some people who are making slightly negative comments about what we're saying at the moment within the confines of Parliament will understand that this is an open and democratic process that's brought lots of people together on the basis of hope, on the basis of determination, on the basis of democracy. That voice cannot be silenced. That voice cannot be stopped. That power cannot be denied. Together, we are very, very strong. The alternative of staying home and shouting at the television will achieve absolutely nothing. Staying together, campaigning together, working together, marching together may not achieve everything we want, but it's the only alternative we've got. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you for your support.
Show their appreciation for the signers tonight who've done such a fantastic job in signing all the speeches. Well done to you all, that's fantastic. Can you also give a massive cheer for all the volunteers who are working day and night to put on these meetings around the country? Can you you also give a cheer to our fantastic speakers? And just before we go, and I finally thank Jeremy, can everybody just remember this? There's only 1 week left to register to vote. If you haven't registered, do so. There are many people who are not in the Labour Party. I'm one of them myself who have registered to vote because we can see that politics is changing before our eyes. So if you haven't registered, please do so. Please make sure that you campaign non-stop for the next few weeks. And I just want to leave this thought, that Jeremy is not a name caller, as he said, but there is no doubt, as people get more and more worried, that Jeremy can sweep to victory on the back of the support of millions across this country. They will get dirty. They will do the name calling. They will try the politics of fear, like we have already seen in this country over the last year. So it's up to us. Join a union if you're not in one. Join a local campaign, support your anti-racist campaigns, support for building council houses, a decent welfare state, support your NHS, talk to your friends, your comrades and your colleagues, because we may not get an opportunity like this for a long, long time. And imagine waking up on one day in September, switching on the radio or the TV, and there's a politician, and he's arguing for an end to austerity, for equality for all, against discrimination, for LGBT rights, free education, housing. Imagine how you'll feel. You'll feel bloody fantastic, so make sure he wins.